We don't always see it, but every age of humanity has a shadow that rises quietly long before the world notices. You feel it when society becomes louder but emptier, when people have more information but less wisdom, when everyone is connected but no one is truly understood. In times like these, the darkness isn't a monster lurking outside. It's the quiet dulling of the human spirit, the erosion of courage, the forgetting of purpose. And whenever humanity drifts too far, whenever the world forgets the sacred truth that we come from something greater, something divine, God responds, not with storms or miracles written across the sky, but with souls rare, powerful, chosen souls. 7 of them in every era. 7 elite ones chosen not because they are perfect, but because they are necessary. And today, I want you to imagine that you and I are walking into that story together. Because understanding who they are is the first step toward realizing whether you might be one of them. I remember the first time I felt the presence of one of these souls. Not physically, but in the way the world bends around them. They move differently. They question everything. They don't adjust to darkness, they disturb it simply by existing. And before we dive into their 7 archetypes, we need to understand why God sends them at all. Because behind the viral spectacle, the cinematic battles, the epic moments that pull millions of viewers in, there is something deeper, something ancien, something holy. God never sends these 7 to fight demons with swords. He sends them to fight spiritual decay with presence, intention, and radical transformation. The true battlefield is the human heart, the human spirit, the collective vibration of the world. And every one of the 7 carries a frequency that pushes back the darkness simply by living as they were created to live. But here's the twist that most people never realize. These 7 rarely know they are chosen. They don't wake up glowing with divine power. They wake up confused, misunderstood, pulled toward things no one else cares about. They don't fit in because they weren't designed to. God hides their identity until they are strong enough to carry it. So the first sign of an elite chosen one is not confidence, it's discomfort. Have you ever looked at your life and thought, why do I feel this inner fire when everyone else seems so asleep? Why do I sense something bigger calling me even when I can't explain it? If you've ever felt that, it might already be God whispering your true name long before the world can hear it. The first of the 7 is usually the seer, the one who feels the invisible currents before others do. They sense when something is wrong with the collective energy of humanity. They feel sadness that isn't theirs, anger that doesn't belong to them. They are the early warning system of the divine. If you have ever walked into a room and instantly felt the truth beneath people's masks, you may recognize their role within yourself. But the seer doesn't fight darkness by running from it. They fight by shining awareness so bright that lies and illusions cannot survive. And this is only the beginning. The second elite one is the breaker, the one who shatters generational patterns. Their life is the battlefield. They are born into chaos so they can learn to transcend it. Trauma molds them into warriors. Pain becomes their initiation. And when they finally rise, the chains that once held their ancestors crumble behind them. If you've ever wondered why your life has been harder than those around you, you might be carrying this archetype. The breaker doesn't come to live an easy story, they come to end an old one. But even these 2, powerful as they are, cannot shift an entire era alone. That's why God sends the light bearer, the one whose energy itself becomes a lighthouse. They don't preach, they don't force, they don't demand, they simply radiate. Their presence makes others want to rise. Their kindness disarms darkness. Their authenticity exposes the fake. These people walk into the world like a sunrise breaking through fog, and suddenly everything makes sense. You've met someone like this before, someone who didn't even try, yet changed you simply by being themselves. And as we walk deeper into the truth of these 7, I want to ask you something. A question only you can answer. Why do you think your soul chose this exact moment in history? Of all the IRAs, all the lives, all the timelines, you chose this one. Why? Could you be here not just to survive, but to influence the collective awakening that is happening right now? Now picture this. The world is on the edge of a spiritual tipping point, not toward apocalypse, but toward numbness, toward losing the sense of the sacred. And when the world forgets the sacred, people stop asking big questions. They stop searching. They stop hearing the subtle voice of their own soul. That is the true definition of darkness, not evil, but spiritual amnesia. And the seven are sent to awaken memory. The fourth elite one is the protector, a soul who carries strength not to dominate but to shield. Their mission is not to fight war but to prevent it. They defend the vulnerable, guide the lost, comfort the broken. The world calls them strong, but their strength comes from compassion, not aggression. They sense danger before it appears, not because they fear it, but because they were built to block it.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
And as these elite ones rise in different corners of the world, something extraordinary happens. Their frequencies begin to resonate. Invisible threads start pulling them toward their destiny. Sometimes they meet, sometimes they don't. But their impact echoes into the same collective field. The fifth elite one is the revealer, the one who exposes hypocrisy, deception, and hidden agendas. Not with violence, but with truth so sharp it cuts through illusions. They are the ones who ask the questions everyone else avoids. The ones who stand up when silence feels safer. Their weapon is clarity, and darkness fears clarity more than anything else. Imagine for a moment standing in the presence of all seven. How would the energy feel? Heavy? Electrifying? Transformative? Now imagine realizing that you're not just learning about them, you might be one of them. The sixth is the healer, but not the kind that fixes wounds no, the type that heals the roots from which suffering grows. They carry empathy like a divine instrument. They absorb pain so they can transmute it. Their awakening is often the hardest because emotional sensitivity becomes their training ground. But once they learn to master it, they become unstoppable. And finally comes the seventh, the ascender, the one closest to remembering their origin. They are born different, awakened early, often misunderstood by everyone including themselves. Their presence lifts entire groups. Their breakthroughs ripple across the collective field. They don't fight darkness, they transcend it. Before you ever realize who you are, before you feel the first spark of divine responsibility rising in your chest, God places you in a training ground disguised as an ordinary life. And the more powerful the soul, the stranger the training. This is the secret almost no one understands. The seven elite chosen ones are not shaped in temples, monasteries, or quiet mountaintops. They are shaped in confusion, rejection, heartbreak, loss, spiritual hunger, and the kind of isolation that forces a person to confront their own essence. It never feels like preparation. It feels like life is working against you. But in reality, every obstacle is a sculptor, carving away the parts of you that cannot carry God's mission. If you've ever wondered why your life shook you so hard when others seem untouched, maybe it wasn't punishment. Maybe it was refinement. Maybe the fire was not there to burn you, but to forge you. What most people call suffering, the elite chosen ones experience as awakening. Not immediately at first, it feels unfair, heavy, confusing. But eventually they begin to notice something strange. While others collapse under the same weight, they change under it. They deepen, soften, sharpen, and expand. The seer becomes more intuitive because the world ignored them. The breaker becomes stronger because life tried to break them. The light bearer becomes brighter because darkness tried to dim them. Every chosen one emerges from a different type of storm, and that storm becomes their armor. You and I both know people who crumble at the slightest inconvenience. But the chosen ones? They survive things that would destroy anyone else. Not because they are better, but because their soul carries a mission that demands resilience. And you have to ask yourself, why has life trusted you with battles others never had to fight? God doesn't train the chosen by removing obstacles, He trains them by revealing who they become in the presence of them. That's why the elite ones often spend their early years misunderstood. You might remember moments from your past when you felt like an outsider in your own family. Not because you were wrong, but because your consciousness was older. You saw things others didn't. You question things others blindly accepted. You broke patterns your ancestors repeated. That's not rebellion, that's assignment. God hides the identity of the chosen behind confusion because hidden identities grow deeper roots. You might think your spiritual strength came from books, teachers, or rituals, but look closer, it came from survival. It came from the nights you held yourself together when no one else could. It came from the pain you turned into wisdom, the fear you turned into faith, the loss you turned into power. Every elite chosen one eventually reaches a moment of spiritual rupture, a moment where something inside them breaks open and lets the divine light rush in. It might happen after losing someone, after failing deeply, after being betrayed, after hitting a rock bottom so dark you had to choose between staying dead inside or resurrecting your spirit. And most people don't realize this. Resurrection is not something God does for you, it's something God does through you. The moment you decide to rise is the moment your real mission begins. That's when your energy shifts. People begin responding to you differently. Life begins rearranging itself around your new vibration. Opportunities appear. Old patterns dissolve. Intuition sharpens. It's almost as if the world finally recognizes the soul you've been carrying all along. But here's the deepest truth of all. Before God sends the elite ones to battle spiritual darkness in the world, He first makes them confront the darkness within themselves. You cannot guide others through fear if you're still running from your own. You cannot expose deception if you still lie to yourself. You cannot carry divine light if you're afraid of your own shadow. And this is why the training feels so brutal. It forces you to face the exact darkness you were born to defeat. Have you noticed that your greatest wounds mirror the world's greatest problems? That your personal battles align perfectly with the spiritual battles humanity is facing right now? That's not coincidence. That's alignment. When God prepares the seven, He doesn't just test their strength, He tests their spirit, their humility, their integrity, and their capacity to love in a world that has forgotten how. Because the greatest warriors of light are not the ones who fight the hardest. They are the ones who shine the brightest. There comes a moment in every chosen one's journey when the training, the pain, the confusion, and the awakening converge into something extraordinary. The recognition of their spiritual power. Not supernatural tricks, not fantasy world magic, actual spiritual influence, the real kind that can shift atmospheres, redirect timelines, and awaken dormant souls simply through presence. Most people go through life thinking reality is fixed, unchangeable, solid. But the seven elite chosen ones live in a deeper truth. Reality is responsive, fluid, and shaped by consciousness. And the more awakened a soul becomes, the more directly they can impact that invisible architecture. If you've ever walked into a room and felt everyone change because you arrived not because of your words, but because of your energy, you've already tasted a fragment of this power. The seer's power is perception so precise it becomes prophecy. They don't just notice patterns, they sense where patterns lead. Before a conflict breaks out, before a relationship crumbles, before someone betrays their own integrity, the seer feels a spiritual tremor. This power isn't meant to make them anxious, it's meant to guide them into becoming spiritual navigators for others. Their gift is the one that warns humanity before humanity harms itself. And if you have ever felt the future tugging at you in quiet whispers, you know exactly what this power feels like. The breaker's power is liberation. Wherever they go, chains fall, internal chains, generational chains, societal chains. They don't accept the rules the world hands them. They rewrite them. And their mere presence makes others question their limitations. Their power is disruptive in the best way possible, forcing the old to crumble so the new can emerge. If you've ever ruined a toxic pattern just by refusing to participate in it, you might be carrying the breaker's fire. The light bearer influences reality through resonance. Darkness cannot survive in their field because their energy destabilizes anything built on lies, fear, or ego. People feel safer around them without knowing why. Hearts soften, minds open, arguments dissolve. And this isn't charisma, it's spiritual voltage. Their presence raises the frequency of the environment and reality responds. If you've ever noticed people confessing their secrets to you or feeling peace simply because you're near, this could be your gift unfolding. The protector alters reality through will, not aggressive will, but grounded, immovable certainty. When they decide someone will be safe, that person is safe. When they decide a path will open, it does. Their conviction becomes a spiritual force. They are the guardians of humanity's spiritual infrastructure. They're the ones who stand between chaos and those who can't defend themselves. If your heart has ever pushed you to defend someone weaker, even when it cost you, you already know the protector's signature. The revealer's power is truth that destabilizes illusion. Their words don't act like normal speech, they cut through deception, confusion, and manipulation. Even when they whisper, their message lands like thunder on the soul. They don't just give information, they deliver revelation. And revelation reprograms reality because it dissolves the false narratives darkness thrives on. If you have ever broken someone's illusions without meaning to, simply by telling the truth, you carry this blade of clarity. The healer reshapes reality from the inside out. Their energy recalibrates the people around them. They don't fix symptoms, they dissolve the root wound that created them. When they forgive themselves, the entire energy around them shifts. When they choose compassion over bitterness, the collective emotional field lifts. Their power is quiet, but seismic. If emotional pain around you tends to surface and resolve, even when you never try, you possess the healer's frequency. And then there is the ascender, whose power is elevation. They vibrate at a frequency so high that anything near them is forced either to rise or to fall away. They create breakthroughs without effort. Their inner alignment becomes a gravitational force that bends timelines. They don't fight darkness, they transcend it so completely that darkness loses access. If people often tell you they feel different after being around you, if life shifts dramatically when you shift internally, you might be touching the edge of this rarest gift. But here's the deepest truth. None of these powers exist for ego. They're not given to make the chosen ones feel special. They're activated so they can serve, uplift, and transform a world sinking into spiritual numbness. The seven were never meant to dominate, they were meant to illuminate. Their power works only when rooted in humility, purpose, and alignment with God's will. And the more they surrender their ego, the stronger their influence becomes. And now the question that matters most: which power feels like it's awakening inside you right now? There comes a moment in the journey of every chosen one when the world around them finally begins to reflect the truth they've carried in silence for years. Not with lightning striking the ground or cosmic signs painted across the sky, but through a shift so subtle yet so undeniable that the soul can no longer pretend it's ordinary. This is the moment God has been preparing them for, the moment when their internal transformation becomes an external assignment. And when even one of the seven elite chosen ones steps fully into their identity, darkness trembles. Not because they fight it with force, but because darkness cannot survive where consciousness is fully awake. The final awakening is not a single event. It is a convergence. You begin to notice divine timing aligning with mathematical precision. People enter your life with messages you needed to hear. Dreams sharpen into instructions. Old desires fall away like dried leaves. And the world begins nudging you, sometimes gently, sometimes violently, toward the exact place where your power is needed. That's how the divine summons the seven. Not with words, but with alignment. Not with commands, but with undeniable inner truth. And the moment the chosen ones say yes, the battlefield appears not as a location, but as a vibration. They begin noticing the energies behind situations, the intentions behind words, the spiritual stakes behind the events unfolding around them. When the seven rise, they do not gather like superheroes in a movie. They awaken across the world, separate, unseen, yet connected in ways hidden from the human eye. Their collective activation sends a ripple through the spiritual fabric of reality. The seer starts receiving clearer visions. The breaker feels an urgent clarity about the patterns they must dismantle. The light bearer wakes with an unshakable peace that spreads to everyone they encounter. The protector feels a pull toward places or people who need shielding. The revealer feels compelled to speak truth with newfound boldness. The healer's empathy intensifies into a power that transforms pain into wisdom. and the ascender begins to transcend old limitations that once held them down. None of this is random. It's synchronized, like 7 notes in a divine chord finally being played. This is when spiritual darkness begins to panic. Darkness isn't an entity, it is a system built on fear, illusion, distraction, and spiritual sleep. It thrives when humans forget who they are. But when the 7 awaken, humanity's memory is restored piece by piece. People begin questioning their unhappiness. They sense their purpose again. They feel a tug toward healing, growth, and truth. The 7 do not change the world directly, they ignite the world's ability to change itself. Their presence is catalytic. They awaken dormant heroes. They inspire silent warriors. They remind the lost of their identity. They reconnect the disconnected. And in doing so, they become the spark that God uses to restart humanity's spiritual heartbeat. Yet the final awakening also brings the greatest test. Because the moment you realize who you are, the world will attempt to pull you back into who you were. Old fears resurface. Old patterns reappear. Old shadows whisper, not to destroy you, but to confirm that you have outgrown them. Your reaction determines whether you rise or remain. Most people retreat at the doorstep of their destiny, but the chosen ones step through it, even trembling. That courage is what separates them from the rest of humanity. God never needed them to be fearless, only faithful. And here is the deepest truth of all. You don't become one of the 7 by being chosen, you become one of the 7 by accepting the call. The real battle is not against darkness out there, it is against the doubt within. Once you conquer that, your power becomes undeniable. And the moment your soul says, I am ready, heaven reorganizes itself around your decision. So now I ask you, are you ready to rise?